We're live. Fantastic. So this
All
will
right.
be the third of these chats that I've done, these Connect Live chats. And today, Ed, thank you, Ed, for joining. It's much appreciated.
Glad to be here. Glad to be
Yeah,
here.
we are probably going to, I think last week I was speaking a lot about calculation groups, which are definitely the in thing at the moment. So that was a really interesting and not in-depth discussion, because once you get in-depth, it just goes on forever. Interesting
Right.
forever, but I get confused very, very quickly,
Yeah.
But today, you seem to be very often a person of Power Query and M
hmm
IntelliSense, no?
Oh,
Then
yeah.
it's,
I could talk about that for 10 hours.
I know, right? This is it's a source of great frustration for me sometimes with the M IntelliSense when you see quite often a lot of these updates coming from in Power BI of these fantastic new features, and the first thing I'll always do on every Power BI update is I'll go and I will check the IntelliSense to see if it's being fixed, and it has not.
Yeah. No, it's a disappointment every time. And IntelliSense, I have started using Tabular Editor 3 for DAX because it has such a great IntelliSense engine. It is the best
It
DAX
does.
editor, bar none. It's better than Power BI's built in. So I love it. And so I wish the Power Query IntelliSense was better. I know some people are really experts with it and they turn it off because it slows it down and it has the bugs. But I need the help with, you're doing a function that requires 5 arguments. I don't have those arguments memorized, and I don't remember where is the third one the list or the fourth one the list. I don't remember. So I need that IntelliSense. I can't even remember how to spell some of the formulas, the functions, because some of them are so long. But so you just have to work around it.
I think that's reasonable as well. You'd have to have a very deep understanding of M to not need the guidance of IntelliSense. I mean, I can understand you could say, I frustrate myself sometimes as well because I know it's there. Hey, Christian, how you doing, mate? I know it's there, and I always forget. I'll have the error. I'm like, what's the error? And I look, and I'll see the first thing, the date, or all this type of stuff.
Right.
I think it's one of those things, probably from my perspective, so very much a consumer, a customer, that I always say, I can't work out why. Why is it not updated? And the thing is, now it's been for so long. When it does get updated, I'm expecting something like amazing, like IntelliSense updated, and also this host of fantastic new features.
Right.
I don't know, but it does slow you down. But that being said, I will never get over how much I actually love and enjoy working in Power Query.
Oh, I do. Now, let me share a tip. I learned this yesterday. So I've been working with IntelliSense and Power Query for, I guess about 3 years, because I guess that's when IntelliSense first came out with Power Query. It used to just be, nothing. So how if you have you've built a formula and it maybe has like 2 or 3 things, and let's say it's a date, and you say, I just want the date. I don't want the date time. And so you try to wrap it with like date, date time dot date, and then open paren. So you type date time dot date, or you start and then you tab, and it clobbers your function, right? So it overwrites part of your function.
Yeah.
So last night I'm in a user group meeting and Matt Allington's doing it, and he said, "Oh, you can avoid that if you put a parentheses before your function." And then you go back before the parentheses, and then you start typing IntelliSense. IntelliSense will see the parentheses and not clobber the rest of your function. And I thought, that's the coolest thing in the world. You shouldn't have to know how to do it, but if you do, you'll save yourself some frustration. Because I have done stuff and I'm like, I don't remember what that was. You have to escape. So, so I thought that was a really cool tip.
That is a cool tip.
To break IntelliSense from breaking.
Maybe you can tweet that later, because I'm really intrigued. So I will forget everything that you just said. That's a very, very cool tip, but my memory is very, very tragic.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll kind of recreate it with an animated GIF and kind of post that, because I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And that's just one of those things that, that's not documented anywhere. And if you've never seen it, then you won't know how to do it. Yeah, so Christian's saying he learned it from Matt a few months ago. So there's no telling how many people Matt has shown this.
Exactly.
So it's a really interesting, just one of those little things that you discover. And I don't know that he discovered it, but he's on that train. So that's good.
There are a huge number of things in Power BI, Power Query that are not documented, but are extremely helpful. And I mean, of course, documentation is always an extremely difficult thing to get right. And the amount of things that can be done in Power BI, Power Query to actually document every single one of those things, from my perspective, does sound like a complete impossibility. But when you discover these things, it's like, why? Why is it not written somewhere? Why do I have to find that from a person, from a person, you know?
Right.
But no, this is what I always thought with Power Query, because basically my journey into Power BI started with Power Query. And I remember the first ever trainings I did for Power Query. I knew pretty much nothing, but I was still given the trainings because I was the only one who knew something, you know? And I was always astonished at the amount you could achieve, and still can, by just clicking on buttons, you know? Like the transform, add a column, the right click, and all these different options, the amount that you can actually do to data without actually knowing any code at all.
Yeah. Yes. It's a very easy tool to get started with.
Yeah. Absolutely. Of course, and as you get started, and I always say this in videos or colleagues or whomever, when you use Power Query, to always make sure that you keep the formula bar switched on, so you can kind of see, so you kind of start to understand what's going on. 1 second, got a question here that I want to highlight, if I can do it. No, 1 second. I haven't seen that, no, but I clicked on the wrong one, so I apologize. Here we go. Is it true? That would explain that. Actually, it's a good question.
I don't know. It would explain why some of the documentation for Power Query it's basically repeats itself and gives you no information. So yeah, I would love, kind of like what the SQL BI team did with DAX.guide. And they have all these great videos and examples, and it goes way beyond the definition of DAX. I want powerquery.guide, or m.guide or whatever. Because
someone right now is reserving that domain.
Yeah, could be. It's and what frustrates me too with Power Query documentation, it says, okay, take a table and do this thing with it, but it doesn't show you a table. It shows you all this code that materializes a table. I'm sorry, if I'm in the matrix, I don't see the numbers. I just see what's there. So I need the table materialized in front of me. Don't give me the code for the table. So there needs to be some pictures.
I think it's also really valid distinction that you make between the whole thing with the DAX and the M documentation. I think because from what I see people using Power BI, like DAX is considered to be infinitely more interesting or helpful, or I don't want to say cooler, but you know what I'm saying. So
it seems to be the sexy side of Power BI for some reason. The
sexy side of Power BI. I like that. I'm definitely stealing that. And it's so yes, there is more on it, but also, especially when you use the example of DAX.guide and the Italians, it's just sometimes, quite often, it's a really step-by-step process. You start here, you do this, you end up with this, and these are the steps beforehand. Whereas M, or with the documentation for Power Query, as you say, it's just like, this is what you have, and it's confusing to know how you do it up until that stage, or it's not as clear. You have to have I think a higher level of knowledge to actually use the documentation itself, which doesn't make a lot of sense. If you need documentation, you kind of want to go from the very start, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not, anybody that uses Excel can go and get the Excel documentation and learn how to use a formula, but you can't really do that with Power Query. It's not written for us mere mortals.
I support this by Christopher, by the way. Ed, by the domain.
Yeah, I don't have the time. I could buy the domain. It would sit there. I have domains that I just need to get rid of. Everybody, you go get a domain, you go, I'm going to do all this stuff, and then it's like, okay, whatever, and you let it expire.
My process with buying a domain is usually I check the domain that I want. and it's taken. I get frustrated at the person who bought the domain and did nothing with it. And then I myself buy a domain and then I do nothing with it.
Exactly.
That's I think a legal requirement, to be quite honest, at least for the first year.
Yeah.
If you have a domain and immediately work on it, then I don't trust that at all.
Yep.
I lost my original domain as well because I just bought it because it used to be big powerbi.guy.de, and I was I've got it, and I forget. I always have on auto renew, and I didn't, and it disappeared. I said, if you want, you can buy it back for €600. I was I'm not gonna buy it back for 600. So no, I'll just go for the .co anyway. Yeah. But the low code part element of Power Query is what I've always. I think it's because I have no real experience in code other than HTML before I got into Power Query. I was hesitant as to what to expect, and this whole click here, do that, and the applied steps, so you can really follow through what you've done step by step by step, is just a beautiful thing. But there are so many trainings, and not even just for Power BI here. I mean, it's probably more so for Excel, actually. There's a huge number of trainings I see for Excel where there is no mention whatsoever of Power Query. It seems to be a part of Excel that so many people just maybe don't know about somehow, or I don't know. And it's just powerful thing just sitting there.
To me, the best thing about Excel today is Power Query, because I still talk to people that spend hours every month doing the same transformations manually, copy, paste, VLOOKUP, append, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? Power Query is incredibly powerful, but like you said, it's so easy to get in on the ground floor. Just use the menu and do those basic transformations, and then you have those macro steps, those applied steps. It's the best kept secret of Excel.
Yeah, it is. And I really, one of my strongest memories of someone using Power Query in the most bizarre way I've ever seen is I had this meeting with a stakeholder. This is quite a few years ago, and they did use Power Query, but they used Power Query to change the order of the columns so that the VLOOKUP worked.
Unbelievable. But that's the kind of stuff you see.
It was amazing. I looked at it, and it was in a meeting, it was in a telco, and I had to mute my mic just for the sheer level of just frustration of what happened. Because for so long, just use it. It's there. It's fantastic. You can do all this stuff. And fantastic, the person used it for the first time. So respect, well done. It's always good to get in on a new tool. But it's like, you were so close, but you're so far.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, that's probably the funniest example I've heard.
It was a bizarre situation. But it was also it took me a while to kind of realize, a while to realize or consider the importance that I saw so many examples of DAX, and I kind of thought about it for about 10 minutes. And of these examples, there are so many where just like a little bit of work in Power Query and M would have made the DAX so much easier, so much more basic. Instead of having to do 15 lines of DAX, you could have done it in like 3. And I think that's also something to be considered. I mean, when I started my current job, I was told that basically what we work with as a data source is the cube. So we have live connection to the cube, and this is what we do. It's actually not the case. I was very happy about that because my heart broke a little bit. I was like, what? So I can't do any data transformation? I can't use any Power Query? I've just got to connect straight to the cube, and then that's it. And that's what it was for the first 2 months. And I was very happy when that was kind of changed. That's what I was what I would be doing, because I don't think I could enjoy Power Query quite as much without Power BI as much without Power Query.
Yeah.
What we got there?
Yeah.
Power BI cleaner is all done. Yes, exactly. That's where you do all the cleaner work. That's where you do all the fun stuff. I think also because the amount of my first days with Power BI, I was always linking to like really random data sources and just to see what I could do. There's maybe it's a personality aspect as well, but there's a joy that you can get by taking a horrible data source and making it look so beautiful and clean and prepared for its load into Power BI. If you link to something horrible and then you do your transformations and then it's ready, I don't know. I'm not a particularly tidy person, but when it comes to data, that process is very, very fun.
Yeah, when I'm building a report, I might kind of wireframe what I want the report to look like, and I know where I'm going with it. But I will spend probably 60 to 70% of my time in Power Query getting that model, because I'm a very lazy person and I don't want to create DAX measures that are 50 lines long and spend 6 hours in DAX Studio trying to get it to work. So the more I can do in Power Query, or the source system, but usually for me it's Power Query. I'm not a SQL person. That's what I'll do, and it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. One of the things that I'd learned the absolute hard way, and because I'd never worked with a cube data source before I started my current job, when I was importing data from the cube and I didn't know how bad this actually was to do, I would connect to the cube and then just use this button to take data, and not knowing that actually the far better way of doing this, I hope I'm not saying anything wrong here, I could be revealing more ignorance, is I'm connecting to the cube, I can then just use this, what's it called again? Where you basically test the performance of the query, and you click on copy, and it brings you this whole line of code. What the hell is that? And then you use the query analyzer.
The performance analyzer.
Performance analyzer.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I learned the hard way that I should be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
My boss looked at me and said, Ben, when you get the data from the cube, why is there all these like hundreds and hundreds of cross joins? I was like, I don't know. I just click on the buttons and that's what it ends up with. And then I discovered that this is the correct way of doing it. And it was quite so much more efficient, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But because the button's there, and because you can do it with the button, get more data from the cube, you can do it with this button. The assumption is that is just the right way. For example, when you use also this column from examples, it's a fantastic tool to use column from examples, but sometimes it writes really weird M.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you can learn from it, but you also have to learn from it and then kind of improve upon it,
Yeah, I almost never use it, and I forget it's there. And sometimes I'll spend time Googling for the function that I need or whatever, and I forget about that from example. But I learned the text. What was it? Text between delimiters a few years ago from that column from examples. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And it's amazing how you can split data compared to trying to do that in Excel. Left, mid, right, find, and you can do it with between the comma and the period, I want that data, and it's 2 clicks and you're done.
Yeah, I feel sometimes I have PTSD from reading Excel formulas with the just 35, 40 if statements, and I just look at it and I don't know what to do.
If I see an Excel formula more than 2 lines long, I just close Excel, because I can't even read it. I have to copy it out in Notepad++, and it's like, okay, the parentheses go here, and you kind of, format it. There needs to be an excelformatter.com, and Excel needs to honor that formatting.
That would be quite cool.
I can't read those formulas. And if I see a Power BI, if I open up Power BI and it looks like these big, long Excel formulas, I know I've got a mess on my hands to clean up.
I must admit that was my first 6 months of work. My first 6 months of work with Power. This is obviously a long time ago. So I've tried to make up for my sins back then. But I used to write like that because I was used to it. I was like, okay, you just write. And then it wasn't until I had to go back to my earlier work and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I don't understand. And the more complex the DAX get, of course, the harder. When it's just, calculate sum, then okay, it's not the end of the world.
Sure.
But when you start adding stuff to that, then it just, you start to understand how massively important the formatting actually is.
Yeah.
But then sorry.
Well, I have a macro in Tabular Editor, and it goes through and it formats all the code, and then it copies the code and puts it in the description, so that when you hover over the measure in the model, the tooltip shows what the measure is, and it's all formatted and it's all perfect. And
That's pretty
so
cool.
I use that all the time. Yeah, I learned that from Reed Havens.
Okay,
So
I like that.
that's his code, and he's got it, and I stole it from his website. But I use it every day, multiple
Nice.
times.
Okay,
Multiple
I might have a
times.
look at that. I might also give that a
Yeah.
bit of a theft, by the way. I just need to correct myself here because you're asking the question. What about Career is it like performance analyzer? Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever used the query diagnostics?
I don't like it.
I'm not a big fan of it.
No.
And again, I'm just not smart enough to understand the results. I dig through it and I'm like, okay, whatever. And I move on. If you're trying to fix a problem, I think it's helpful. If you're trying to optimize your code, I haven't been able to make it useful. So
Yeah,
it's not user friendly.
I don't think it is either. It came some of these options, they all came to update pretty much at the same time, and a few of them were helpful. But what I could be wrong in saying this, but it was also under the impression that it's based on the first 1,000 rows.
Typically, yes. There's always a
Yeah,
top 1,000 that's issued
yeah.
when you're in the tool.
So I never really understood the value of that, to be honest. If I've got a few million rows and it showed me based on the top 1,000, it's a very, very small percentage to be doing diagnostics from.
Well, because if it pulled in the million, you
No,
could
no,
build a bunch while it worked.
no, I understand. I understand why it has that limitation, but I feel the
Yeah,
limitation just devalues it somewhat, you know?
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
I could be nitpicking, you know? We're having this conversation. I'm a massive, as I said before, fan of Power Query. It's fantastic, but I think it's the standard thing that we do with Power Query and Power BI. We use it, but we also kind of complain about it quite a lot as well, you know?
yeah.
The someone mentioned before how you can click on the buttons. I think this one you cannot break anything. I brought this up before. This is true. The you can click on anything to see what's the outcome, and you can't break anything, which is largely true.
There's one exception to that. If you delete a step, you can't fix that.
Yeah,
There's no undo. And I
yeah.
cannot tell you how many times I have clicked on something and it didn't work. And then I like click again. And then I found out it did work. And then I deleted another step.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I had been working for half an hour on a list generate and I deleted it. I thought I was going to be sick.
That's pretty brutal.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So that undo is not there. So that's the delete button on the applied steps is the one thing you can break something. Not your data, but oh my gosh.
Yeah. 1 second. In Excel, there's an undo feature. Is this what's been said here? Because this is news to me.
I didn't know that either. That's interesting.
Unless I'm misreading that comment, please, Christian, let me know, because if you have an Excel and a Power BI, I'll be very upset.
Yeah.
Because I feel that Power BI we should go.
I don't even like doing Power Query in Excel that much because I can't go back to Excel. I'd rather fool with it in Power BI and then I can work on it and then I can copy it back over. But the Excel editor, it locks my data file. You know, you can't go back into Excel without close and apply.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll connect to the data in Power BI, model it there, then I'll copy and paste it back.
Okay.
I'll see. So I knew it had Control Z in the editor, but I've never seen it undelete a step.
Exactly. For sure.
But I knew it worked in the formula bar. So I'll have to try it.
Oh, no, wait a second. I'm feeling a bit of backtrack coming here.
Yeah, I think he's backpedaling. Yeah, it works in the formula bar and it works in the advanced editor. It doesn't work when you actually delete a step, or at least I've never seen it work that way.
Yeah. The advanced editor is also really a bold place to go. I think the first time I managed to actually do some proper editing inside the advanced editor and I wasn't terrified and it worked, that was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
Because when you first start and you look at it, this is also a thing that you always bear in mind, that if you do something in the advanced editor, I always just copy paste before I make any changes, just in case I do something terrible. So I can just paste in the old version because, oh my God. I've seen someone in a training as well talk about the advanced editor, and then they accidentally made a change and they clicked on OK. And then like during a training, when that happens, it's just like the worst feeling because you kind of pause for a second. Okay, I've got to try and play this cool and pretend that I know what I'm doing and try and fix this while everyone not knowing that I just made a terrible mistake. I think the most frustrating thing that happened to me during a Power BI training. I used to go to travel to a city in Germany called Ludwigshafen. It is not a pleasant city. It's just basically a massive factory, and had this like room full of it was quite a sterile atmosphere. The people are very nice, but like very, very professional business kind of, not what I'm really used to, you know? And on the second day that we gave 3-day trainings, on the second day of the training, there'd been a really massive Power BI update. So much stuff had changed, like the look of the program, where things were. I think this is back when the adding your own custom theme moved from wherever it used to be to now under the view. Just a massive change of Power BI. I opened it and I realized I just couldn't find like half of what I needed to find. It was just very, very embarrassing. I've never done so much BSing, I shall say, during a training that I did on that particular day. It was pretty heavy.
Yeah, I make sure. So, I use the store version, which auto updates.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I'm training, I use the downloadable install, so it cannot auto update, because that's the last thing I want is, okay, I'm going to start training and holy cow, I just got a new version and I don't know, usually they're pretty minor, but every once in a while, like, back in, what was it, February this year, they completely changed the model view.
Yeah.
For the better, but I don't want to be stumbling around in a training with that going on. So I always have 2 versions installed on my computer.
That's actually a good idea. Just before you do any training, just open because I always have this thing during the training is when you open it and before the training, I always say, make sure you have Power BI desktop stored on your device, because the number of people who don't, on every single training, there's always one person for me who doesn't have it, which is hilarious to me. Like you go into any training, like, oh, here's a Microsoft Word training. Do you have Microsoft Word? No. Okay. But the people, they'll check and they say, yep, I have Power BI stored on my device, but it hasn't been it's the desktop version, the website version, and it hasn't been updated since like 2018 or something. And it's like, yeah, this is going to be challenging right now.
I had a training like that a few months ago, and it was, okay, let's open it up. And you send an email, download the link or get it from the store, get a recent version, 2 or 3 months old is fine. And inevitably somebody says, mine says February 2019. Is that going to be okay? No, it's not.
No, it's not. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
So it's, it is what it is.
The trainings are fun, but they have their own special challenges that come with them. And that's, and the difficult thing for me was since the pandemic, all the trainings have been online, but they've also been cut down. So my previous company, we did like 2 or 3 days training. And my current company, it used to be a 1-day training, but now all Power BI trainings that I give since the pandemic have been an online 3-hour training. To get any amount of information into a 3-hour Power BI training, when the first half hour is people who don't have it installed or have these issues that you inevitably have, can't access the data. My God, I've learned lots of new skill sets. Probably the most important one being patience. Since the Power BI training in the pandemic, it's mad. What's this?
Tough.
3 versions: store version, RS version, and beta version.
Oh yeah, I don't want the report server. I try to stay away from that.
Yeah, I don't know. 1 second. 3 hours. 3 hours is nothing. 3 hours is indeed nothing. I completely agree. Yeah. It's You pack in what you can try to pack in, but you just touch bits and pieces, the report survey.
Yeah. Online training, I mean, it is what it is, the pandemic and et cetera. And I don't think we're ever going to completely go back to on-prem. I think companies have got this hybrid mentality and we're not always going to be from at home, but I think there's going to be a little bit of both. But doing the online training is tough because you say you talk for 30 minutes and you say, any questions? And it's just dead silence.
Yeah.
And you're like, Bueller, anyone, I feel like that scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's mentally exhausting. It's more tiring to me to do an online training than an in-person, because if everybody's in the room and you're talking to them, there's feedback and you know what's going on. You can immediately see who's confused. and you can
Yeah.
see who's lost.
Very true.
Online, you have no idea because everybody's camera's off, and then you're 20 minutes into it, and somebody goes, "Wait a minute, back here when you said connect to Excel, I can't get that to work." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Hey, we're 20 steps past that,"
Yeah.
and you have to help them. You want to help them,
Hmm.
but you could have detected that in an in-person training much quicker. So it's challenging.
Yeah, because you always say, like in the in-person training, or both actually, that if you have any questions, you get stuck, let me know. But in the in-person training, you can see a facial expression. You can see someone start to get frustrated or to blank out, or they start to talk to the person next to them, asking them if they can help. So you go to it. But yeah, it's a very good point. It's what can you do, And then
they won't unmute.
Yeah. And the online training as well, if the person has an issue, then they have to share their screen. Everyone then you go to their screen, you have a look at it, and it's challenging equals it sucks. This is actually true. It's the only thing I kind of miss about being in the office. I love home office. I really love being in my office. But when it comes to Power BI trainings, it's just also it's a strange thing. I don't know why, but it's the kind of way when you give them the training, you can kind of like walk around. And I find it easier to kind of express myself when I'm gesticulating or pointing at a big beamer on the wall than sitting on my desk. I think I'm I'm a walkie movie type person than a sit down when I give a training. But that's just where it is.
Yeah. So Christian says that he would ask the students to stay with the camera on, and I would prefer to do that. Unfortunately, some people don't have the bandwidth to do it.
Yeah.
So if they have the camera on, then they're stuttering and whatever. So
this is a big problem in Germany as well, because the internet in Germany is just certainly in some places just an absolute joke. So I have colleagues who are on really have amazingly fast internet, and other people who are still got the copper going on, and it's just it's not doable, to be honest. So I would, of course, to ask is always a good idea, but when it's not possible, it's just kind of stuck with what you got.
It is what it is.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but it's okay. Romania. Yeah, this is true. Honestly, this is a top 5 internet speed in Romania. When you have a look at all these the countries with amazing internet, I've always noticed that Romania is very good. Germany, people get surprised quite often at how bad Germany is for internet, but it's just shocking for everything. I've had colleagues also who, again, we used to travel from Berlin to Ludwigshafen on a train, just like a 5.5 hour train journey. It's nice. You sit down, relax, have a beer, have a chat, whatever. But in Germany, when you leave a city on the train, you won't have any signal on your phone. So you can basically, if when the train stops in a station, your signal might come back, your network coverage might come back. But as soon as you're on the train again, going to a different city, the internet will just completely drop out. And I've had a colleague who was from Brazil, and he was doing his nut in, literally starting to rant about how is it possible sometimes I can go to I can be somewhere in a rainforest and have signal, but here in Germany I'm in a countryside. It's yes, unfortunately yes, very way.
That's amazing.
It's not even 3G. No. What's this thing? E and stuff. You're sitting there and you got E on your phone with 1 bar. It's fantastic. I will now do literally nothing. I mean, you can have a conversation, of course. But
do the trains not have Wi-Fi?
Okay, so some of the newer trains do. So, and the Deutsche Bahn, the German train company, they have Wi-Fi, but it's very new, and it is laughably bad in some places. It just, I mean, I think I've been on. It might have improved. Obviously, I haven't been on a train for a couple of years for obvious reasons, and I haven't traveled. And before the pandemic, I hadn't really traveled for work for about 1.5 years before that. So I would say around about 2019, I think it was just getting rolled out, and it was still pretty bad. So now maybe it's better, but it's pretty poor. It's actually very poor. I was watching a documentary the other day about the reasons that the internet is so bad in Germany. Obviously, I won't go into it now because it's pretty political. But it's strange. You'll have some towns, on one side they have very fast internet, but on the other side the whole copper cabling stuff was never replaced. So they have the download rate of 2 whatever, and on the other side of the town they'll have a couple of hundred. So.
Yeah, it depends on how advanced they were, 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah, America has been notorious for having poor wireless and poor internet because we were leading the world with copper telephone lines back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Okay.
And so we had this great phone system, and then wireless started. And it's like, well, but we have this great phone system. What do we need to invest in this for?
Yeah.
Whereas countries that didn't have great phone systems are like, well, forget the wired. Let's just go wireless. And so Europe is enjoying 3G, and we're still, what was it, 1XRTT and, basic, just garbage.
Yeah.
And, so we've caught up. We're getting 5G. I don't know. I don't care about 5G. I don't know anybody that does. As long as I got LTE, I'm fine. My phone says 5G. It doesn't look any faster to me.
Yeah.
But even internet here is it's so politicized. Getting broadband from the cable companies, it's ridiculous. The cost and the speed is pathetic.
Yeah. It's getting slightly better over here in regards. I used to be that if you'd move into a house in Germany, or I'll say Germany, I mean Berlin. I live in Berlin. If you move into an apartment or a house in Berlin, that sometimes you'd be sitting for like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks with no internet because I had to come and like switch it on or get the connection done, which is always very frustrating. But it is getting better. But getting better means like it's at a place where it should have been like 10 years ago, which I'm sure you can relate to by what you've just said. But yes. A few of the comments are related to infrastructure. It all in Germany comes back to the whole stuff with the GDR, and then the countries coming together, and then something about with Helmut Kohl had a plan to do something, and then never happened. And I'm not going to get into it. It's getting very, very interesting, but somewhat off the topic of what we discussed. But internet basically is a very important aspect when it comes to pretty much everything in our lives. So of course, when it comes to Power BI trainings as well, because you need that good signal. But I was looking before. I was thinking. I was just actually going through some of my old queries, and I used to. One of the first things I did with Power BI I used to do web scrapes to get data get sports data. And what I've always really enjoyed is I never even checked if there's a better way of doing this, is when I know when you have a website and it has no actual table, there are ways of getting that data. What I always thought was really good fun. And again, not fun because it's some kind of amazing best practice, but it's just fun because you're making a mess out of basically HTML. I love getting Power Query to read the HTML and from that construct the your data based on that. So if you go to the website and you right click and then you analyze that particular point in the code, I really love doing that when you have a website where it has no structure, seemingly no structure whatsoever, and from that you can kind of create structure. And I used to have these. Yeah, please.
So I don't scrape a lot of data from the web. I just have not had that need. Have you used the new web, data from web table kind of helpers that Power Query has come out with in the last couple of years, especially in Power BI? Has that been helpful for you?
Do you mean where you kind of enter the data and it kind of from the data that you enter, it starts to construct?
Yeah, based on the web tables. Like I've done it with text files and Excel files, but I've never done it with the web. And it's kind of like these table inferences, and it comes up with some pretty cool code. I've played with it, but I've never used it in production.
I've played with it, but I never got it to do what I wanted to do. I always found that maybe it was me doing something wrong, but it would always tell me from my input it couldn't actually create a table. So maybe it's me doing something wrong. But actually, it's a good. But there are a couple of things that exist in Power Query which I've never fully understood why they don't work how I feel they should work. And I suppose the issue is probably me. That's reasonable. But an example of that is, I work with APIs quite often, and I love working with APIs because they're really interesting, because they're half nightmare because they're all different and the structure is always something. But the Power Query API option has never worked particularly well for me. I always just start a blank query, especially if you're having like an API key or you have to use a key plus like a token.
Oh, okay.
I always find that really hard to do, or actually, I'll say differently. I always find that impossible to do in Power Query using the actual connector for API. And for the searches that I've done, like the Google, of course, Google searches I've done for this, I've never had anyone say, yeah, use this web API. Sorry. Johnny, come on. I love it. That's a terrible joke, but it's fantastic. I enjoyed it. But I've never actually seen anyone say, yeah, the web API works really well and it just does what it does. And this is where you enter the key and you'll get all the results. I've always had to just play around with it or use like a combination of different things that you find on the community website that will finally give you what you want it to give. It's quite strange.
Yeah, I help out on the Power BI community quite a bit, and I tend to gravitate towards the Power Query forum. But when it comes to the API stuff, I just have never had that opportunity. Okay. And I'll leave it, MKey will come in and she'll like, oh yeah, just do this, that, and the other. But it does seem to be a little bit troublesome. It's not quite the simple, it's not like connecting to a bunch of files on SharePoint. You've got to do some work.
Maybe I could do maybe like a little video about that. It's difficult because all the APIs I use tend to be for work, so I can't really use that in a video. I'll get my own. Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Where do you go and get an API to test with? I'm sure there are some out there, but most APIs, it's like business. You can't let people play with that.
The couple that I use, there are actually some really good examples. There's one API that I use, which is completely open, which is, I think, on every single video I've ever made for YouTube, pretty much. It's either a weather data or football data, and they're both APIs. So the football data is like fantasy football, or soccer, and they have a really fantastic API, but you don't need to use a key because it's completely open. So for practicing that sort of thing. But there's a company called in Germany called High Street. Then for that, you do need a key, but you can just request one, they give one to you. And they basically track how many people go down certain streets at certain times of the day. So it's pretty weird data, but it's really good if you want to test it. Yeah, it is quite cool. Sorry, I saw a question for you there.
So do you have a hint on how to include the numbers? I'd have to look at it. I don't. So the splitter.split text by delimiter, I've never used that function just outright. If it's in the code and I tweak it, but that's one of those functions. There's a few functions that I don't just, if I'm in the advanced editor, I have to go get help with that one. It seems to me to be a little bit more complex than it probably should be, but it's doing a lot of stuff.
Reasonable. Also, Johnny actually makes a very good point. There is a product called Postman, which I do have on my computer, which I very rarely use. Not because it's not very good. I just always forget about it, actually. And I used Postman a couple of times when I was first testing the APIs of certain companies. But then I just went back to just doing it inside the PBIX. I don't know why. I don't know. I think that's just my preferred way of working with it. I had Postman sitting there for so long. But yes, I think there aren't a huge number of APIs that I know that you can just connect to. So when I have 2 or 3, I just always use those because they're there. And yes, Johnny's completely right. There is Postman. So if you want to look at it, use Postman. It's not bad at all. Actually, on the note of Johnny, thank you very much for the information. Also, I have a little graphic there. Next week, Johnny actually will be on talking to me next week, so you can see more things like that from Johnny next week. We can discuss APIs and Postman as well as, I'm sure, calculation groups. See, you've given yourself a topic there, mate. This is very good news. But yeah, it's just one of the things I connect to and just like it because, like I say, there's a certain joy in Power Query of just creating something from, and also it's a really good thing with APIs to looping through data. When you create your parameters, APIs always need that. And 1 second. I said that, and I've got the calculation group chat going again. Calculation groups. It's such a hot topic right now. It's making me think, okay, something else new that I have to learn to keep up with the trend.
I just met with a client, and we just solved a thorny problem in DAX using calculation groups. That You might have been able to do it without calculation groups, but it would have been one of these ridiculous things with 15 nested switch statements and all this stuff. And a calculation group is like, oh, 5 lines of DAX and boom, you're done.
Yeah.
Like, awesome.
Yeah, it's very, very awesome. I can't get around that, to be honest. I think it's because stuff like I'm at a point where I'm learning and I'm getting there, and then you got people like Johnny and Bernat and other people posting these most amazing things that are kind of like 10 steps ahead. I'm like, okay, one second, let me think about this, and then
it's like anything else though. I played with calculation groups about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago when they came out, and it didn't click with me, and so. But until you start working with it day in and day out, it's like to me, it's like I almost will overuse calculation groups now. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't need to. I could just do a simple switch. It's 5 lines of code in this one measure, and I'm good. And so I have to, it's like anything else, right? It's the famous answer. It depends. So right tool for the right job. But I do love calculation groups.
Yeah. I think there's just this wonderful joy of just like sitting there and right clicking and all your measures are made, and then you right click again and then all the time intelligence stuff's done. It's like, that's right. I just saved myself 2 hours.
Yeah.
For that alone is wonderful.
It is.
Yeah.
But
yeah, cool. So that's right. That's the 45 minutes. For me, they whiz by. I hope it wasn't too painful for you. I really enjoyed chatting to you. And
very enjoyable. Very enjoyable.
All things.
It's a good chat.
And who knew? And this is I love the direction that these things go. And who knew would end up talking about edge internet on German trains and me mentioning how it gets a bit random, but that's the sheer joy of it.
Nobody realized that was so closely related to Power BI.
Exactly. I just realized I made a graphic that I was going to try and use through this conversation, and I didn't use it. So I'm just going to use it now because I was going to think. Yeah, I'm just going to use it now. I was thinking about how when you first use Power Query, you don't need to have code because you can just click on the buttons. And I thought code, and I thought I could come up. I'll always enjoy coming up with a really, really bad pun, and that was my really bad pun for this particular topic. So there you go. Just force using it. Cool. Anyway, thank you very much to everyone for all the questions and reactions and keeping us going and all that kind of stuff. It was very good fun. And of course, thank you, Ed, very much for your taking part.
I enjoyed it.
And for always being there to mock M-Intelligence with me. Our solidarity in that area is a joy.
Yeah, hopefully maybe we could talk again and it'll be fixed by then.
That would be a cool idea. Do like a celebration session. And we can just sit there and share our screens as M-Intelligence works, and we just sit there with unbridled joy. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. That's a good idea. I like it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care and see you next week.